now. The contentious Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill, which is better known as the BELA Bill, will eventually be on President Cyril Ramaphosa's desk for his signature. Now, the bill got the green light in the National Council of Provinces, despite opposition from the Western Cape. I am joined now by Professor Mary Metcalfe, who's a professor of practice at the University of Johannesburg. Prof, a pleasure to have you on the program this afternoon. Firstly, what are your initial thoughts on granting provincial education departments really the final say on language and admission policies, which of course is proposed in the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill?
It's absolutely a correct position to take. It is already enshrined in the legislation. And for me, it's an understanding that once we've passed a law saying that education is compulsory, the compulsion is actually not only on parents, but on education departments to make sure that there are places for all learners in the province. So the law places the compulsion on government to provide places for all children of all language groups, which means that the balance between the powers of school governing bodies and the powers of government in saying in public schools, which are funded from the public purse, there has to be a say for the provincial government to interact with the school governing body in relation to the language policy of the school. Now, those powers were there before in the South African Schools Act, which was passed in 1996. But since then, there have been different court cases which have clarified that this is, in fact, the responsibility of government. And BELA makes clear what procedures should be followed. It's a meticulous set of procedures so that school governing bodies and communities can communicate and have their say.
So considering the estimated annual cost of over 17 billion rand, what potential benefits and even challenges do you see in really extending compulsory schooling to include grade R?
At the moment, in terms of the South African Schools Act, we have 9 years of compulsory education. That is now being extended to 10, which is more in line with international practice, both on the continent, in which we would be among a group of countries with 10 years of compulsory education, but definitely in line with standards in, for example, Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. So 10 years of compulsory education, starting at the age of 5, I think makes absolute sense. The sooner we can have children in school from the age of 5 and being taught, being brought into the community of learning that a school represents, it makes absolute sense. You could, of course, say, let's start at the age of 6 and go to the age of 16. In South Africa, saying, let's start at 5 and go to 15.
So, Prof, how do you view the balance between addressing legal clarity but also accommodating public concerns in the development of this bill, also given the relatively minor amendments made by the Select Committee?
You know what I found very interesting in the process is the extent to which there was misinformation circulating and huge push to cause concern about the bill. You know, the issues that you've raised are part of the issues that are central, which require detailed discussion. But as you can see, there's strong arguments that say these are completely reasonable adjustments. There was a recommendation that was changed by the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee, where some school governing bodies had asked to be able to have permission to sell alcohol for fundraising events. So if they're having a braai and parents are invited, there was such strong resistance to that the Portfolio Committee changed that provision. So it's no longer legal under any circumstances, even school governing body having a cheese and wine. And that is responsiveness to public pressure. But in the misinformation, I don't know if you saw some of the things that were going around, but completely incorrect information saying the bill allows, for example, a teacher to take a child for abortion. There's nothing in the bill about abortion. There's nothing in the bill around a teacher doing that. Whatever your views might be about whether or not a teacher should stand in the place of parents if it's required, that's not even in the bill. So I think that there's been more controversy than I would have expected, and I think it's part of the politicization, maybe because of elections.
But then it then begs the question as to how important is it for this robust public input in shaping legislation, and how can Parliament then ensure that all voices are indeed heard in this legislative process, especially considering some concerns raised by, for instance, the DA about the consultation process?
You know, I have found this issue around the consultation process very interesting. My first point, as that I've already made, is that it was distorted. The second thing is that I was very frustrated personally, by so many people contacting me, people I know, people I don't know, asking about issues that were concerning them.
Yeah.
And I kept saying, have you read the bill? Can I send you a copy of the bill? And many people that have access to the internet are well-read, educated people. Were not actually reading the bill. They were just reading the WhatsApps. The other thing is that I was aware of so many petitions, like formal letters, duplicated. Now, I think two things. One is that we need, as South Africans, those people who do have access to the internet, that they have a responsibility to respond to legislation, but they also have a responsibility to read the legislation and not just the photocopied WhatsApps, etc. But I also think that, I don't know if this is going to provoke debate amongst people who know more than me, but I find the language of the bill difficult to read. Not the final law. The final law, with a bit of work, you can read through the paragraphs. But there's a formula in Parliament that says this is amended and that's amended, but it doesn't always give you the full text. It only gives you the amendments. Somehow, I think Parliament needs to do better in remembering, first of all, that the bill needs to be read as an entire piece rather than the amendments, because it's confusing. And secondly, not all South Africans have access to the internet. Not all South Africans can download the bill. So to counter the politicization and the misinformation, we need to be able to engage the public and revisit perhaps some of our views of how Parliament works, white papers, green papers, bills, acts, to make it more accessible.
Prof, as we continue unpacking the bill itself, what impact might the provision allowing school governing bodies to opt out of centralized procurement have on schools' autonomy and resource allocation, particularly in disadvantaged areas?
Yeah, this is also a really important issue. Is at the moment, schools, because in the Education Act of 1996, there was considerable power given to school governing bodies, and school governing bodies can order their own textbooks, order their own stationery, and the resources for that are made available to them if they are in the poorest 60% of schools. For schools that are in the wealthier 40% of schools, they raise their own money for that. Now, that is the current situation. Schools can buy themselves. What makes a lot of sense to me, and I've seen it in the provinces that I work in, is that if the province buys the textbooks, you get economies of scale. If province buys stationaries, you get economies of scale. Now, that needs a legal adjustment, because at the moment, schools have that power unfettered. And I know, for example, in KwaZulu-Natal, they ask schools, please relinquish this power to us so that we can buy for you, so that we can get the textbooks and stationery more cheaply. So the BELA, Basic Education Laws Amendment Act, makes it possible for department to say, in this matter, it just makes sense for us to buy and distribute.
Right.
But a school can opt out of that if they demonstrate that they can get the stuff, whatever it is that required, more cheaply. So it's one of the areas where we needed clear explanations. It gets so confused in the anxieties people have.
Let me thank you for your time as we conclude our discussion with Professor Mary Metcalfe. We've explored the complexities surrounding the Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill